I'm so excited to share that through Executive Endurance Coaching, I've officially joined Never Second's Coach and Nutritionist program. Never Second is a science driven performance nutrition brand built specifically for endurance athletes. I've personally been using their fueling system for years in my own training, and I love how simple, precise their approach to carbohydrate fueling is for runners, cyclists, triathletes, you name it. And today, if you want to try Never Second for yourself, our listeners can get 15% off by using the code GRIT15 at checkout. GRIT 15 at checkout. Just head to never2.com and start fueling your training with intention. This episode is brought to you by Koya Performance for Life. Koya combines wearable technology with behavioral science to help you unlock more energy and perform at the highest level. Their coaches have worked with Olympians, Super Bowl MVPs, World Series champions, and other elite performers. Their 12-week program focuses on sleep, exercise, nutrition, mindset, and recovery, blending biometric data from wearables like Aura, Whoop, or Garmin with one-on-one coaching from a team that includes a dietitian, sleep coach, movement specialist, and mental performance coach. Grit Files listeners today receive 33% off the program using the code AGRANDOFF. Visit koya.life to learn more. Today on the Grit Files, I'm joined by someone who knows what it means to lead through uncertainty, build something from the ground up, and help others unlock their potential, Katy Montgomery. Katy serves as executive education faculty at the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School and is one of the driving forces behind the Executive and Leadership Coaching Academy, a groundbreaking program designed to prepare coaches for International Coaching Federation accreditation while bringing world-class coaching education into one of the world's most respected academic institutions. She helped create and launch the first coaching program of its kind within Johns Hopkins Executive Education, a program many of us have described as building the plane while flying it. And I'm lucky enough to be a part of this program. I was asked to be a mentor coach alongside Katy. But before returning to Johns Hopkins, Katy served as an associate dean of degree programs at INSEAD, where she led strategy and operations across campuses in Europe, Asia and Middle East, and North America. Her career has spanned leadership development, executive education, coaching, law, and organizational transformation, giving her a unique perspective on what it takes to lead people through growth and change. What makes Katy's story especially compelling, though, is that she isn't just teaching leadership and coaching. She's actively building systems, programs, and experiences that help others become better leaders. And in a world where uncertainty has become the norm, that's exactly the kind of work that matters. Today, we're talking about the grit required to create something new, the challenges of building a coaching program while simultaneously delivering it, why coaching is more important now than ever, and what happens when leaders learn to ask better questions instead of always having the answers. Please welcome Katy Montgomery. Katy, welcome to the Grit Files.
Thank you so much for having me. And it's exciting to be here with a fellow coach and to really
Yes.
be able to talk about how important coaching is and how much impact we can have as coaches. So thank you
Yes.
so much.
Yes. For all of the listeners, Katy and I immediately connected at the start of the program. We talked about how we both have podcasts. We both are equally passionate about coaching and have a history of working for Hopkins. So this
Yep.
is an awesome conversation. Can't wait to have it. Before we get into the coaching piece, though, talk to me a little bit about who is Katy Montgomery.
Well, if I really had to kind of describe myself, I started out my career as a lawyer. And I
Mhm.
think if we think about the training of lawyers, I think it's very similar to the training of professors. It's very similar to the training of doctors. We teach you how to be an expert in one thing, but
Yep.
we're not necessarily teaching you how to lead, how to adapt to change. But what was funny is in college, I'd been student body president, I'd been rush chair of my sorority. I'd been an active leader and had a lot of leadership exposure at a young
Yeah.
age. And then I transitioned to law, where, you were in this expert space, but you're not necessarily leading and they're not teaching you to lead along the way. And so I think if I really kind of thought about, my background, it's that I really understand what it's like to be trained as an expert, but eventually, if you are good at being that expert, you're given leadership responsibilities. And what does that look like? How do you grow in that space? And particularly if we look at the three primary spaces that I've been exposed to, law, medicine through Hopkins and public health. And and with education, these things are being rocked right now. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
talk about being in a volatile, ambiguous space. And so I think if I really had to describe myself, I think I'm a coach for those kind of people. And that's kind of my niche practice. But I am so fortunate to be doing what I'm doing now and working with adult learners
Yeah.
who are coming to these kind of programs, wanting to be better leaders, wanting to help their team members become better leaders. And I think I'm someone who loves facilitating that and is really grateful and really lucky to be able to do that kind of work.
Yeah. And you kind of alluded to it, but it made me internally laugh a little bit because I remember this experience at Hopkins where you see it a lot, especially in those middle line managers where they've been promoted and promoted and promoted, just really as a retention tool, I feel like a lot of the time. And they aren't properly mentored. It's kind of a disservice to them is that they get into these quote unquote leadership or managerial type roles, but no one's actually taught them how to lead well and how
Yeah.
to develop people well and how to ask the right questions of your employees. So um, I remember that experience at Hopkins where I was like, gosh, there are so many people in these executive leadership roles that, in my opinion, are having a really hard time navigating some of these tougher conversations with their employees. Like, did anyone ever mentor them in how to lead?
Yeah.
And I had a very similar experience to yours where that's kind of what piqued my interest in getting into this field is like, how do we make stronger leaders, which ultimately lead to stronger teams, and then in the big picture, lead to stronger organizations and programs? So sounds like we had a similar experience there.
Yeah, no, definitely. And I think it's not only that we're not teaching people to become leaders, we're not helping them understand the systems they operate
Right.
within. And Hopkins, we are very fortunate to, be affiliated with Hopkins. It
Yeah.
is some of the brightest, most cutting edge, innovative people. But what I think is interesting is that system is massive. It
Oh, it's
is
insane.
complex. It is so complicated. I mean, it's the largest employer in the state of
Yeah.
Maryland. It's multifaceted. It's
Super
got major.
decentralized.
Yes, exactly. And so it's like, in addition, we're not teaching people how to kind of navigate the system and understand, as, like you said, individual leaders within their teams, within their organizations, and within this very large system, what does that look like and how to kind of navigate that? And that's what I'm finding a lot with my coaching practice. And what I love that Hopkins is doing is that they have made a commitment to professional development for their staff. And one of the
Yeah,
options is that staff can participate in executive coaching. And a lot of these people just need a safe space to work through the
sure.
system, to
Sure.
work through the growing pains of becoming a leader. And it's a safe space where there's not judgment and where you're asking questions and empowering them to come to those aha moments on their own. Because as we know, as coaches, everyone is whole, is creative, is intelligent, and has it within themselves to come up with those answers. They just need someone to partner with them along the
Yeah.
way.
Just a reminder of how great
Yes,
they already are. Totally
exactly.
agree. So going back to Hopkins being as renowned as it is, Johns Hopkins is one of the most respected institutions in the world, not just locally, but in the world.
Yes.
Yet this is the first coaching program of its kind within executive education. So why now? Why was this the time that you were like, we gotta build this thing?
Well, so it's really interesting. I think the big distinguisher for us is not that just it's executive education, but that it sits in a business school.
Right,
So
Carey.
so you saw a number of continuing education programs at major institutions, major universities, but it would be in continuing education. It wasn't related to business school. So I
Right.
think first, the co-director and co-creator Carly Ackley and I,
Shout out to
um,
Carly.
yes, Carly is amazing, and Carly has been with Hopkins, and she was first seeing a need because she had created a 3-day kind of intensive coaching essentials program.
Mhm.
So you're a manager, you're a leader, and you want to just get kind of the basics of coaching down. You're trying to move away from that command control kind of situation where you're just telling people what to do, but instead kind of bringing people along and empowering them to kind of be able to have the judgment and the nuance to kind of make the decisions. And it was being heavily subscribed. We were seeing people wanted to go further. We were seeing such a demand within Hopkins of people wanting to have the coaching skills and then eventually wanting to be certified.
Mhm.
And so it was a combination of there's not this in the business school. And so I think what makes our program really unique is that we're teaching people how to become coaches, but we're also talking about how do you bring business principles to coaching. So, how do you evaluate the return on investment?
Yeah.
You know, how do you ethically use AI? What are the business ethics? What do you want to do if you eventually want to pivot, right? So you may
Right.
be a full-time employee, but you're thinking about, we live in a gig economy. We are now
Mhm.
we are living until 100. What does this look like when we retire? How do you take all of that good stuff you've done, but still be relevant in the world? And a lot of people can do that in coaching because
Yeah.
they a subject matter expertise. They have experience kind of in that space, and then they bring the coaching skills. So we also talked about entrepreneurship and what that looks like in opening a business. And so I think that's what we really thought there was this need is bringing the business lens to the work of coaching. And what is crazy, and you worked with our first cohort. We had a full first cohort. Our second cohort launches in October, and it's been full since early spring. And we're going to be launching a third cohort that's going to be fully hybrid so we can reach beyond kind of the Metro DC area
Yeah.
and be able to kind of educate people, all over the world. So we've seen we put it out there. You never, and that's the thing that's interesting when you launch a new program. And having worked in higher ed for a while, you do the market analysis, it's there, but until it actually happens, and just to see that this one really took off, and then the magic of seeing y'all as the mentor coaches, the
Mhm.
other faculty members, but also our amazing students, and seeing it come along and then seeing that the good word's continuing. And it just makes me excited being a coach. I think we should train as many coaches as we can because I think it is such a value add to people and organizations.
Yeah. And to be ICF accredited too is, I mean, coaching, I think we all can agree it's gotten to be like everybody can call themselves a coach, right? There's
Yes,
people that call themselves coaches of anything and everything. But to be
yes,
ICF accredited is a really big deal. And that's kind of the differentiator of how you know, okay, this is a legit coach and when it's not. So to have an ICF accredited program, which is what we're going for here with Hopkins, is huge. Um,
it's huge.
and it does help to validate the work that we're doing in this space. So, um, what excited you the most about this program when you were building it?
Well, I think it was first of all, I had done a program at INSEAD where I was previously an associate
Mhm.
dean, which was called the Executive Masters for Change. It was a year and a half program. It was not ICF certified, but it went through coaching principles. It went through change management principles. We wrote a thesis. We did some practicums. But what I was most excited about, and I know this is going to sound strange because this is not the teaching and the accreditation, but there is something that happens in a cohort when you're talking about coaching, you're teaching coaching and they're doing coaching. It is a dynamic of a special bond that brings those people together because
Yeah.
one of the ways you learn how to coach is that you coach your classmates and then your classmates coach you. And if you're getting into good coaching conversations, you're talking about emotions, background, the backpack of good stuff and bad stuff you bring
Yeah.
to work with you. And so there's a sense of vulnerability. But I think that's what I was most excited is to see what the bond of the group would look like
Yeah.
and what the learning would look like from each other. I knew that we had the content and the facilitators and we were highly engaged, but you never know until you bring a group of adults together what is going to be the dynamic.
Sure.
That's what I was so excited to observe. And
Yeah.
then the fact that we came out of that first 3 day in person and you could feel the energy. People might not have said what they were feeling, but I was seeing it and having been through a program and having launched a number of programs, that's what I was most excited about. And I think
Yeah.
that's something that you can't necessarily put in words because it's such a unique experience.
Yeah. And having gone through a cohort on my own as the mentee and now being on the other side of it and leading the cohorts, um, I walked away with some of my best coaching questions from other coaches. They come away with a different perspective or a different way to ask the same question, and it goes deeper than what I'd been able to get out of my clients. So it was really cool to hear the different ways that people rephrase the same question in order to get a bigger transformation out of a client. It was great to have that. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I love that you use the word transformation because I
yeah.
think it's a big word and I think it's a word that's overused.
Mhm.
But I think if you can create a safe space, really listen. I mean, this is what I tell people. The best coaches are smart people,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So we were very lucky to have a cohort of very smart people.
Yeah.
But like when you're smart, you can, when you're smart, you can pick up nuance. You
Yep.
can ask a really great, powerful question, right? Like, you are able to kind of pull from different kind of experiences and it's kind of like I tell people, like people who read a high amount of fiction tend to have higher levels of empathy,
Yep.
right? And so, if you've been exposed to a lot of things and you're an open and curious person, the coaching can be amazing. And
Oh,
that's what
yeah.
I think we were so lucky is to have so many really smart people in that room.
Yeah, and just the ability to stay curious, like rather than offering that consultative answer to somebody, anytime you feel that knee-jerk reaction to give advice, ask a question, stay curious, dig deeper.
Yeah.
Um, that's how you know, like your really great coaches are really great at probing and asking those deeper rooted questions.
For our listeners
Yeah,
who may not know, in ICF accreditation, there's 3 levels, and our
yeah,
program is for PCC, which is the middle level. And it's really interesting when you're reviewing a coaching conversation, a recording, and seeing if it's meeting that level. You're asking questions about what's not being said.
yes,
That's what means you are a
yeah,
professional certified coach. It's not that you were that first level coach, right?
yeah.
And so I think that's what's where that transformation comes is that you're asking questions about what is not explicitly being said.
Yes, it shifts in eye movement, it shifts in your body, it shifts in your tone. And that was the biggest thing I think you can agree. That's what we really drill down on with our mentees is these who questions. Who is the person behind this action that you're taking or not taking? Who do you want to be on the other side of this? And you really have to pick up on those nuances in order to get to the heart of that. It's not just, oh, they wanted to leave with this script to go to their boss. Like that, yes, that's easy to ask questions around. But why does it
Yes.
matter that you're going to have this conversation with your boss? What does that look like? And why every time we bring this conversation up, does your body language change and your heart rate goes up and you talk faster? It's that, picking up on that and
Yes.
helping people navigate those situations. What scared you the most about building this program that had not yet been created at Hopkins?
I just think it's always the unknown,
Mhm.
right? I mean, I think if you were to ask, I think Carly and I would both say we really know coaching, right? In
Yeah.
addition to being kind of PCC certified, like we study it, we teach it, we do it. Like I feel like we both felt very confident as coaches. But when you're building a program, right, you don't know exactly what will resonate, what won't resonate. Something that might be clear to you may be confusing, to the student.
Sure.
Also just the logistics of it, right? And I
Big time.
had forever, been, both at Hopkins and at INSEAD, I had been in dean roles of business schools, which were primarily MBA programs. So we're not even talking undergraduate, we're talking kind of graduate students. And I remember us having to sometimes tell students, like the big joke was like you have to tell somebody something 8 times for it to
Right.
connect, right? And we're talking about Hopkins and INSEAD. These are amazing institutions. These are very bright students. And I would always be like, why aren't you getting this, right? But again, it's the emotions around that. It's everything else that's
Sure.
happening. Are you in fight or flight? And so it was really interesting also working with these very bright students is like, what's going to connect? What's not going to connect, what's going to send them into anxiety, what's not going to.
Mhm.
What is what's really interesting when you create a program is the cadence of a program. And
Yes.
particularly in executive education, the assumption is that 100% of your students are working full time, right? And then add into that, most of them, in addition to working full time, have children, have
Right.
extracurriculars. I mean, these are busy people, these are not full time students. And so it's understanding how to keep the cadence of a program going to keep them engaged and not disconnect and slow down,
Yeah.
but not too much overwhelm, right? They need a little stretch, but not too much. And so until you actually launch a program, you don't 100% know if your cadence is right, right? And
Yeah.
so, and I think that's why when we recruited people like you to be our mentor coaches, we said, look, we're building the train while it's running
Mhm.
because we're going to have to edit and amend and, and be flexible because we want to try things out. And so
Right.
there were things that had to be maybe communicated again, or flexibility, or, stretch out a deadline.
I remember very distinctively in the beginning of my formalized coaching journey. I kind of have always had that coaching piece in my background, but when I finally decided to do it professionally and create my own coaching business, I
Mhm.
have a business coach myself. And I remember the first big piece of advice that she gave me that I continue to have to remind myself every day is do it messy. Like, because if you don't, you'll never start. You'll never actually do this thing. So you need to be fearless enough to do it messy. You're
Mhm.
not going to have the perfect website to start off with. You're not going to have the perfect scripting. You're not going to have the perfect cadence.
Yes.
But if you don't start and you don't figure out what it is that you don't know, then you'll never do it. So, it's the same, I think, with creating a program is like you got to kind of start messy, hire people that are okay with it being messy as you figure it out. Um,
Yes.
and then solicit feedback from those people and figure out how to make it less messy the next time around. But you got to start somewhere. And it is always scary to be like, oh, I'm going to put this product out that I know isn't the finished thing, but like it's going to help us get closer to the finished thing.
Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting because we did a lot of debriefing with the
Yeah.
cohort. But, our program hasn't completely finished because we still have some people who are in the stage of passing their recording
Yeah.
and stuff. So it's going to be interesting to kind of reconnect with, the mentor coaches and get some feedback on that. And what's great is also along the program, we've been getting feedback from the cohort, on
Yeah.
the teaching, the modules, the professors, the coaches. And so, but I think it's also moving forward is like, and again, with adult learning and with a cohort of about 38 people, you know, we've nailed some stuff down, but until that cohort number 2 launches, and these are adult learners, again,
Yeah.
who have been high level positions, very, accomplished, you could have a whole new dynamic,
Yeah.
right? But I think the thing, I know this is going to sound way too simplistic, but it all comes down to anxiety. It all comes
Sure.
down to anxiety, and people are either trying to pass off the anxiety or clarify the anxiety. And this is
Yeah.
like one of my biggest coaching question is like, why are you anxious about this?
Yeah.
What is happening, right? And so, and we know that emotional contagion is real, right? So if
Yeah.
I'm anxious as the co-director, that's
You're
not
gonna
going to
feel
help.
it.
Yeah, I'm not going to help the mentor coaches with their potential anxiety, and it sure
Sure.
as heck going to help my students who are overachievers and and want to pass and cross all the T's and dot all the I's. And
Sure.
so it's so funny to just see again a system operating,
Yep.
and kind of what puts people into kind of anxiety and how do different people handle that ambiguity, right?
Sure.
It's so fascinating.
Yeah, and add in the layer of the mentor coaches who are also, I'll speak for all of us, we're all highly educated, highly
Yes.
successful coaches and individuals. But even we were, stopping and having some questions. So
Yeah.
it's almost harder in a way when you do have the whole group of extremely intelligent folks, is that they have a lot of really intelligent questions too.
And opinions. Everybody has an
Yes,
opinion. Yes, they
yes,
could not agree more.
yes,
And so, and it was interesting because I think, one of the things that Carly did when we recruited everyone is to say, look, we are so excited. You are such a good coach. We're bringing you on. But heads up, one of the skills we're looking for is can you roll with it,
yeah,
right? Because there would be some stuff. And so, and it's really funny. And it's really funny to see kind of adult learners, right? It's like some are very comfortable with the ambiguity and
yeah,
others get very exacting. And what happens is then their control comes out,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And it's very much becomes a task list. We get away from the real intent and objective, and then it gets very task
Yeah.
oriented. So I think it's pretty funny. I'm sure you probably felt this is you weren't just doing your education piece, you were probably also just coaching people on the side.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And emotion management is like, okay,
Yes,
this is a situation that you can't completely control. And let's move into acceptance phase here. So what can
yes,
we control?
yes, yes, yes. What's
For
within
sure.
your locus of control here? Yes.
Correct. So much of that. What have been some of the unexpected challenges of creating a program while simultaneously delivering it? So, for everybody who hadn't yet gathered, not
Mhm.
only did Katy co-create this program, but you're also one of the coaches within the program. So, you're creating the programming itself, but then also delivering it. So, what was an unexpected challenge having to juggle both?
I think that's really interesting. What had happened is in order to coach in this program and for us to be certified, you have to have PCC level. And
Mhm.
then we expected a few other kind of requirements. And so when we were recruiting and we wanted to have a certain kind of caliber, we didn't have enough coaches. And so I stepped in as a mentor coach.
Yeah.
And I have to tell you, I am so happy I did it, right? Because I could see the learning coming along and I
Yeah.
could see the aha moments and I could also see the gaps. And one of the things that we did is because we have so much content and the content, all of the pre and post work and a lot of the actual in class kind of content was created before the program launched.
Yeah.
And kind of midterm, you will see that we added on even extra in class practice coaching. So we
Yeah.
reduced the actual content time by 30 minutes to add even more live coaching. And so people could either observe, be
Yeah.
coached, or and that was a switch mid program. And that was because I was seeing as a mentor coach,
Mhm.
okay, we need, despite the buddy coaching, the pro bono coaching, the mentor coaching, that we really needed to kind of deliver and give even more opportunities, to kind of live practice, the coaching. And so I think it was very, very helpful to me. It's something also that people might not know who are listening is in order to become PCC certified, you have to pass a recording
Yeah.
um, that compares to what are called these PCC competencies, these markers. And then eventually you have to sit for an exam. And I have to tell you, really going through and being very meticulous about kind of coding and grading people's calls and then sitting and talking to them and then walking them through the feedback and then seeing the progression of their growth as an actual kind of coach. Um, that to me, I learned so much that will inform the second cohort's curriculum. And so
Sure.
I'm very thankful that I was able to do both and kind of be on the ground doing that. So I wouldn't say it was difficult. I think it was actually rather helpful
Yeah.
and informative.
Yeah. And I can say, having been on the end that experienced that shift that you made in the middle, it made a massive difference in the confidence of coaching that I was seeing from the
Yeah,
cohort members because they really, early on, content's content. You can memorize that. But when
yeah.
you put it into practice, that's when people's confidence in it really does change.
Mhm.
And in the beginning, they really weren't as confident about it because they weren't getting actual application and practice in the field, so to speak.
Yeah,
So when you made that adjustment and were able to pick up on that quickly, made a massive difference in the way that people were executing their coaching. So it was absolutely
yeah,
mission critical that you were there and witnessed that because it made a
yeah.
huge difference in all of the cohort members.
Yeah, and I think, I can't remember exactly, but I want to say, let's say there's like 70 competencies.
Yeah.
And and I remember again being like, a competent person and going through training and being like, "Oh my gosh, there's all these numbers, there's all these competencies. I don't know what 4.1 is or 7.6." And and that putting me kind of into fight or flight. And so I think it is and and this is the way adult learning works, right? You're supposed to have the moment of kind of, confusion and then there's a little
Yep.
bit of clarity and then it comes together. So I think we kind of followed, you know, the the path that we should have. But I think it's getting people even more comfortable with those numbers and those competencies because I think, particularly high achievers, they think they want to know it all and they want to know it fast,
Yeah.
right? And so it's giving them, repeated exposure beyond all of the other exposure we gave them. Yeah.
Yeah. Gonna shift away from the actual program itself and into the value add of coaching because I really want our audience to kind of understand coaching better. It is a growing profession. So I'm sure people are like, God, everywhere I look, there's a coach. And what's the difference between a coach and a therapist and all of the other things, or a consultant? So I want to highlight that for people who may be considering either becoming a coach or hiring a coach. For someone who's never experienced coaching, how do you explain what coaching actually is?
So what I say to people is, I think of coaching as mostly you're focused on a behavior change.
Mhm.
Right. And I tend to be very much like outcome driven coaching.
Yeah.
Right. So I want someone to have an aha moment and I want someone to have an ROI. Right.
Mhm.
So, I tend to be, I don't want to say the word directive because that's kind of contradicts what we should be doing in coaching. But generally, what I say is that I am partnering with the client and I believe that they are whole, creative, and intelligent and capable and I am partnering with them to kind of lead to a behavioral change or a goal or an outcome that they wish for. So I have quite a few people who it's so funny. We'll be scheduling their coaching appointment and they'll be like, "Oh, I have therapy that day." I can't do too much self-discovery on one day.
I
So a lot of people do kind of one in this, do both of those things.
know.
What I tell people is that they come in and I usually do what is called a coaching intake call. Some people call
Yeah.
this a chemistry call. And it could be as short as 15 minutes or as long as 30 minutes. But it's like, what's bringing you to coaching?
Mhm.
What would be successful at the end of our partnership? What are you looking, to coaching for? And I think probably when people aren't ready for coaching is they might not, no one ever knows exactly what they're looking for because it's
Right.
not until we get in there and ask those powerful questions that
Yep.
we really get to the root of what's going on. But if someone, comes in and goes, because, sometimes we coaching partners certain programs. Like if you sign up for an executive education program, it might come with 3 coaching sessions. And some people will be like, I don't really know what I want to talk about, right? I think it's most helpful if you have an idea, right?
Yep.
So, and those ideas can be varied, right? I want to get better at having difficult conversations at work.
Yeah. Big one.
I want to learn how to give feedback. I want to become more strategic. I want to finish, a 5K. To have something, where you can kind of, be kind of goal oriented and kind of work through. And what a coach does is we'll start to kind of really listen, and we call it active listening. So we're listening for what you're saying, but
Right.
what you're not saying. It's
Mhm.
asking powerful questions. And then it's bringing about what are the action items and how are we going to hold ourselves accountable in order to start to see that change, that behavioral change happen.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I think about coaching. And I have a lot of people who come with something super specific, and I have a lot of people who come more with a like what I would say overarching umbrella of something, and we need to dig out what that actually
Yeah.
looks like. Now, within coaching, some people have specialties, right? So, for example, I know you do some kind of exercise, endurance, marathon running related kind of coaching, right? So,
Mhm.
there could be that. Some people do purely career coaching, which
Yep.
could be a little more consultative, right? It could
Yep.
be talking about how to, giving feedback on a resume or a mock interview. Some people might do, very specific leadership coaching. Some people might do executive coaching. There are some people who do coaching that sits within like a religious, kind
Sure.
of,
Like somatic coaching is huge right now too. It's
yes,
there's a coach for everything.
there's a coach for everything.
There is.
So, what I tell people when they're looking for a coach, the first thing that's important is the chemistry.
Yeah, for sure.
Right? And some people are better at chemistry than others. And so they might have a more diversified group. They're, what I always say is maybe in their Gallup top five strengths, woo is one of them. They're winning
Yeah.
others over. They just kind of have that personality and they can kind of respond. But some people look for a specialty. They want to know, look, I'm a physician. I want to be coached by someone who is in the medical profession or has been, right? You might have someone who is in the C-suite of a Fortune 500 company. They're interested in someone who's been there, done that, right? But what's most important, I think, is that they have the chemistry.
Yeah.
You feel that there is a dynamic there and that you trust them and that you feel safe there. And I think that's the first thing that people really need to look for in a coach. I think secondary is based on what your goal is. Does somebody have kind of that niche expertise? But I think the
Yeah.
first thing, hands down, is chemistry.
Yeah.
Um, and I can tell you as a coach, that's also important because sometimes people cease coaching contracts because of unforeseen circumstances, illness, death.
Mhm.
But one of them could be like, this is just not a lack of a fit. And if you actually look at the coaching ethics, if you're finding that you yourself can't be a capable and competent coach because this person triggers you
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
you don't see the fit, that's important, as a coach to be aware of too, if you're not kind of, completely, there and present.
Yeah.
So it goes both ways. And so I think that's why the chemistry call is particularly important.
Yeah. And I would say, even just to add to that, at least for me, and this is something for somebody to consider if they're looking for a coach.
Mhm.
I kind of traditionally, like with a therapist, you kind of want somebody to help you feel a little bit more comfortable. You want to feel like a little warm blanket around, and that's lovely. But
Yes.
you, with a coach, I think you also need to be like a healthy bit intimidated by what that coach is bringing to the table for you, because you want somebody who's going to give you the confidence and the guts and the tools to pursue something that obviously you have not yet been able to execute on your own. So to have somebody who is a couple steps ahead of you in moving into a similar career,
Mhm.
or somebody who's got a little bit of that chutzpah that intimidates you a little bit is not necessarily a bad thing in a coach, because you're going to need it. They're the fire under your butt that you probably have been lacking. So,
Yeah, yeah, and I think there's a balance there,
yeah,
right?
for sure.
Some people might, rather than the word of intimidation, they might, use the word of, I need someone who pushes me. I need
Yes.
to
Yeah.
pull me outside of my comfort zone. I
Mhm.
need someone to challenge the status quo with me. Because again, I would just challenge you on the word
Yes,
intimidation.
you're right. It's a true
Because, yeah,
coach here.
because some
So,
people say when I feel intimidated, that goes back on the feelings wheel, I would guess, to maybe
yeah.
fear, right? And we
Yeah.
don't want people to be in fear, so we want to create kind of the safe space. But yes, but I'm thinking back, and I had a great coaching relationship, but this is probably one example where this person was very vulnerable, but I asked something and she started crying and she turned her camera off. And I had never had that before.
Yeah.
I mean, people are gonna be like, when I'm about to say this, I'm like, this is not gonna come off right. But I've had lots of people cry in coaching.
Yeah, me too. But it's usually a great sign.
Yes, exactly. Not as a negative, but having a breakthrough or an
Right.
aha moment or getting
Right.
to something that wasn't necessarily, kind of had not yet bubbled up. And she turned the camera off. And I thought, oh my gosh, I
I'm
pushed the
fired.
question one,
I'm
yeah,
done.
I pushed the question one too far. Like, did
Yeah.
I cross kind of a boundary here? And that's something also as a coach is kind of understanding every single client is different,
Yep.
right? And the way that they manage their emotions and their reactions. And I think this is where it comes into kind of being smart. This also reminded me of I had this one person, and I was like, I just can't get it.
Yep.
I can't get it. And it became a challenge for me. And it really wasn't until I used an analogy from Ted Lasso.
I
And
love
it
that.
was like, "Ah," and I was like, you've got, and
Figured her
so,
out.
yeah, but you get some people that you coach. And I mean, immediately in session one, it is like, they're like peeling the onion. They're figuring things out. They're starting to put it into practice. And other people, it is a more, it is a longer journey. It's not kind of quick and furious. And so you've also, as a coach, got to constantly check yourself because I am an energy begets energy person. I'm
Yeah.
high energy, I'm high extroversion. And so I have to check myself, that some people take longer and
Yeah.
some people take those pauses and some people take more time to reflect. And again, you're partnering with them. You have to meet them where they are. You
Yeah.
can't become directive, including in your energy.
Yeah. I will never forget too, when I was going through my cohort, it was me and another coach, and the leader of the cohort asked the same question of both of us, and it landed entirely different. The question was, she said, often I like to say to people, well, what do you know? If they come into session and they say, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. She's
Yeah.
like, one of my favorite questions is to stop and say, what do you know? And for me, I was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing because typically you do know something. You're either
Yes.
looking for permission to do it or
Mhm.
you're scared to do it, but you typically do know like innately what it is that you're
Right.
hung up on. So I thought that was such a great question. For this other mentee, that was a triggering question for her because she had somebody in her past kind of minimize her and say, well, what do you know? What do you know? And
Is
that she heard it as that. I heard it as, well, what do you know? Like, what's
Yeah.
there already that we can work on? So, figuring out those nuances about how people perceive the same question is huge too. And as a coach, you have to have an ability to be able to pivot and adjust to what your client
Yes.
receives.
Yes, it is. It's the pivot is real. And I think
Yeah,
that's what makes people in training the most anxious
sure.
is, is they get
Like,
so
no, we need a
focused.
system that's the same.
They're like, I need to set the agenda.
Right.
I need to be in awareness.
Yeah.
And so when you're focusing so much on hitting the competencies, you're not fully present, which means you're not
Right.
maintaining
You're never
presence,
going
which
to get
means
through
you're
it.
not active listening. And so it really is a skill. And I can tell you, the more you do it, the better you get.
Yeah.
I still feel like today, I feel like I've been coaching forever, but now, like coaching almost full time, I feel like just being able to pick up and being able to pivot and being able to kind of, ask even better questions. It gets better every year.
Yeah. Um, I know you as well as I, we've worked with really high performing executives, VPs, directors, really smart people. What do you think have been some of their misconceptions about coaching, but also their resistance to coaching? Because I think some people at the top are the ones that probably need it the most,
Yes.
but they also are the ones that come with this heavy book bag of misconceptions and a resistance to this thing. So what are some of those misconceptions that you've seen?
Well, I think the biggest resistance to coaching I've seen is when someone hasn't on their own elected to coaching,
Yeah.
but it has been suggested and paid for by their employer. And I would say if I have done this 100 times, 98 times, the employer did a horrible job of setting up coaching and why someone was doing coaching,
Yeah.
right? Coaching is a benefit, it is a plus, it can help you improve,
It's a
you know,
gift.
but
It's a
instead,
true gift.
it is a gift, but instead people see it as punitive,
Yeah.
right? It's like, go to timeout, and
Yeah.
so when somebody comes into coaching thinking it's punitive, that is, you see massive kind of, resistance to that. So that is usually something that if I'm being contacted by a third party, by the employer, by the organization, I have a serious conversation about how are you delivering this? Is it being delivered as a gift? What are the expectations? There's still, going to be confidentiality, and really trying to communicate that. So I think that's the first piece. Um, Emotional intelligence is so fascinating,
Yeah.
right? And I have worked with quite a few people who have come to coaching because they have low emotional intelligence.
Isn't
They are high performers, but low emotional intelligence.
it
And
funny
when
that those two usually go hand in hand?
I know, but when you have low emotional intelligence,
Right.
you're usually not aware of how low your emotional
Right.
intelligence is, right? Because you're just lacking that kind of lens.
Mhm.
And so that can be really interesting as a coach, but
Yeah.
also incredibly challenging because a lot of these people aren't coming and saying, I want to be a better leader, I want to be a better communicator, I want to help my people grow. They don't see it like that. They're very much old school command and control, task oriented, and they're not seeing that they're not recognizing the disconnect, with that. So I see that, coming up kind of quite a bit.
Mhm.
Um, I think also a lot of times ego.
That's
Everyone has
big,
ego. Our
big
ego
one.
shows it. Yes. And let's be honest, a lot of people who are in positions of power where the stakes are high, where you might have a bullseye on your back, if things go well, but if things go bad, it's an arrow right to the bullseye. They carry a sense of ego. And so it's really understanding how to kind of break that down and what is a healthy ego, what is not a healthy ego, and what are kind of blinders. And so I think that those are quite, those are probably the most kind of significant things I see, with women leaders. I see, sometimes I see themes of, I see a lot of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
I see a lot of boundaries, not keeping maybe a, kind of hard boundary. So talking a lot about authority, task, role, because, they're taking on, more than they need to. And so I'm seeing those kind of themes in that space too.
Yeah. And I've noticed, at least for me, a strong leader, there's this whole perception that in order to be a really good leader, you need to be able to do all of the things by yourself. And the strongest leaders that I have witnessed have been the ones that surround themselves with a phenomenal team of experts.
Yes.
I feel like coaching is not too dissimilar. If you are a high performing executive, you probably are going to have a gym membership. You're going to work with somebody at the gym. You're going to
Yes.
maybe have a nutritionist who's working with you on your diet or your nutrition, a doctor.
Yes.
A coach is one of those people that you would surround yourself to be a really high performing and successful leader. It's not too dissimilar. You are not in this role because you're supposed to know everything. You're supposed to be able to be smart enough to know when to delegate it out and to solicit feedback and help from others. Those are the successful leaders. But there's this like misconception that they have to do it all by themselves. And if they ask for help, then it's a huge weakness. It's
Yeah.
a flaw.
And I love that you use the example of like you have a trainer, you have a doctor,
Yeah.
you have a lot of long-term relationships as a coach with people.
Yeah.
And I think when you start a coaching relationship, it can be fairly intense, right? There's
Yeah.
a regular cadence to it. You're getting to know each other, you're working through some kind of issues in between sessions. They're going into those action items. They're holding themselves accountable. We're
Yeah.
coming back. We're iterating on that. But these people that have long-term relationships with, we might not continue on that every 2 weeks, 1 hour.
Right.
Then I get really flexible. It could be 1 hour a month. It could be we do 30 minutes every, kind of 2 weeks. I think when people think about coaching, yes, a lot of people come in and say, here's my goal. And then hopefully, they're able to accomplish that goal. But I think long term, having a safe space to come in and walk through issues,
Yeah.
right? Or walk through when you're getting in your own way, or talking about how I'm not delegating, or when you're seeing yourself slip, or even just walking through certain scenarios. I think it is amazing to have that. And here's the thing, to particularly have someone that is not your spouse, not your partner, not your boss, not your colleague, where you can
Yeah.
go and have those kind of powerful questions and those aha moments. I do like the analogy of it being kind of part of your support team. I think
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And everybody at some point, I don't care what level, what your position is, where you are in life, everybody has a moment of that analysis paralysis where they need that outside party to be like, whoa, you have been looking at this thing for way too long and you've been looking at an iceberg. Let me
Yeah.
come in and help you pick off the pieces of ice that we can take off to make this thing feel smaller. And that for me, that has been such a gift from my coach because I have a tendency to look at full iceberg and I immediately go into shutdown mode. And I'm like, there's no way that I can conquer that iceberg today. And my
Yeah.
coach will come in and be like, well, no, duh. Like nobody can. So how can we take pieces off of this
Yep.
thing so that it's manageable? It's really
Yep.
that too.
Oh, it is. That's, I mean, my class made fun of me, but I'd be like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a
Yes,
time, right?
exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. So I think it is a real it's a real gift to be able, and it's interesting. My sister was just appointed chair of her department. She's a faculty member, and once you take on that level of leadership, it comes with a coach.
That's
And I love that. And I
yes.
love that you're seeing and we teach this in our coaching program. It's like, okay, you're now a coach. How do you start building a coaching culture in your organization, right?
Yeah.
How do you kind of build this out to empower people? And so I love the idea that we're starting to see companies and organizations really understand the value of a coach,
Yeah.
making it part of their culture, and it's taking the sting out of it and the punitive nature of like, oh, you need a coach. It's like, no, welcome. Here's this service to
Yeah.
help you be the best you can as you lead and grow, which I
Yeah.
think is fantastic.
Yeah, I have a client right now who they actually sought me out to work with their organization, and they have 6 executives that they want coached, and they offered them the option. Traditionally, every year they gave them a bonus at the end of the year, and it was like $4,000 at the end of the
Yeah.
year. They gave them the option this time. Do you want the $4,000 bonus in cash, or would you like that money to go towards an executive coach?
Okay.
Every single one of them picked a coach.
Well, kudos to that organization. They're doing
Yeah.
something right. Yeah.
Yeah, so what a great retention tool rather than like promoting people without any tool belt, you
Yeah.
know, or preparation. What a great retention tool and just a professional development tool. So if we position it right, it can be received as a gift. It's just a lot of people, for whatever reason, associate it with like a performance plan almost.
Yes.
Yeah. So now I know that we're short on time here, so I want to give you one last couple minutes to wrap up here. But where do you see coaching profession heading over the next 5 or 10 years?
It's so interesting because we teach a model on AI in coaching, and I've
Oh,
actually
big.
taken a course. And so I do think that coaching is going to become more mainstream, but I think you're going to see it in lots of different, modules and forms and the way kind of the coach comes alive. I think that you are going to see some coaches using AI to support the work they do, and to kind of help people kind of be accountable between appointments. I think you're going to see certain kind of AI or kind of a chat bot kind of coaching.
Mhm.
But I don't think AI is going to take it over. So what I think is coaching is going to become more mainstream. There's going to be lots of different ways to access it. But I think what we're talking about, the traditional coaching where one-on-one, I am partnering with you in a completely confidential and safe space. I think it's going to continue to grow. And the reason I think so is this. I think that we have fully moved away from the command and control kind of way of doing work. That was your boss tells you what to do and how to do it. You do it well. You tell the person who works for you the same. If that happens, you keep getting promoted. I think that we have seen with the current administration and the cuts to certain programming with COVID, with lots of things that are happening across the world that are unexpected, that we live in a volatile, uncertain, changing and ambiguous space. We have to be able to empower people to think in the moment, to be problem solvers, to be proactive. And if we don't have that, I think these organizations are going to collapse. And so I think you're going to see that we are at a crossroads where organizations are going to need to bring in coaches to help bring the current leaders along, right? And then start to build out that coaching model and that coaching culture to start to be able to build organizations that can adapt quickly and can go without kind of the explicit known, right?
Yeah.
That they can actually go to work and build the bus while we haven't yet put on the wheels. I mean,
Yes.
so I think we're going to see it grow. I think you're just going to see it in lots of different modules and places, but I think the actual traditional one-on-one coaching that we do will never cease to exist. I think it's too important.
I agree. And I am just, I guess, old school in my thought process that humans want to be around other humans. I don't care if the world shuts down, we're going to find a way back to each other because we want to see other humans.
Well,
You
and
know?
loneliness is a real epidemic and it's a
Yeah.
real issue, and people want connection, and
Yes.
people, want to have vulnerability, and people want to have feedback.
Yeah.
And so I think it's definitely going to happen. And so I think it's an exciting time. And just to kind of plug, I think it is a fantastic um, training to do to supplement if you are a leader, a manager, a supervisor, someone who is looking for growth into those areas. I think it is a great way if you're thinking about a second career, if you're looking for a side hustle, if you're eventually moving into like the gig economy. I think it's a great place to be. And I think you can do a lot of good in the world and have a lot of impact as a coach.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm obviously very biased,
Yes.
but I couldn't agree more. Katie, you have been such a wealth of knowledge. I feel so honored to have been a part of this program and to have you as a guest. So keep doing the good work.
Thank you. And
Um,
thank you for having me. And thank
yeah,
you for being such a great coach.
yes, and congratulations on the first of its kind program. I'm excited to see where it goes, and we will hopefully have you again shortly. But thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye.